In this video, we're going to be looking at ways of picking a sample from a population, and we're also going to be looking at why we might want to do that. Let's get straight into the question. Electra, Sylvia, and Tim want to find out their year group's favourite TV programme. There are 200 students in their year group. Electra thinks they should ask all 200 students what their favourite TV programme is. Sylvia thinks this will take too long. She suggests numbering the students from 1 to 200 and using a random number generator to select 5 students to ask. Tim thinks that 5 students wouldn't be representative. He suggests that he could ask 15 of his friends about their favourite TV shows. And the question we need to look at is, what are the advantages and disadvantages of each of these ideas? Before we fill in this table, let's get some key vocabulary out of the way. The 200 students in the year group represent the population in this case. We can see that Electra wants to ask the whole population. She wants to ask all 200 students. And the advantage of doing this is that she's going to get the right result. She wants to find out the year group's favourite TV programme, and by asking everyone, she's going to get everyone's views. So I'll write that as she will get an accurate conclusion. The problem with asking a whole population is that this can be very time consuming. And depending on the kind of research you're doing, sometimes asking a whole population can be very expensive. In the case of these students, asking everyone is going to be time consuming, so that's the disadvantage. Let's have a look at Sylvia's idea. She wants to number the students from 1 to 200, and using a random number generator, she can select 5 of them. We say that this is selecting a sample of the population. A good thing about selecting a sample like this is that it can save time. Sylvia can get a very quick result by asking just 5 people. The problem is, this sample size seems quite small. She might not get an accurate result. These 5 students might not represent the population as a whole. So she might draw an inaccurate conclusion. If, for example, she may be asked 50 students, that would still be quicker than asking all 200 students, but that could be a large enough sample that what they say might give you a really good idea of what all 200 might say. So the size of a sample matters. By the way, before we go on to Tim, we should note that Electra also is technically sampling. It's just that her sample is the entire population. Okay, let's move on to Tim. Tim thinks that 5 students wouldn't be representative. That's just what we've been saying, and he's probably right. So he's suggesting what he thinks is better. He wants to ask 15 people. Now 15 is better than 5, but these aren't 15 randomly selected students, these are 15 of his friends. Now, his friends are more likely to have similar interests to him, and they might not be representative of the kind of interests that all 200 people in the population have. This means, just like Sylvia, Tim is also at risk of drawing the wrong conclusion. Just as another example, imagine you wanted to find out what the country's favourite sport was. But instead of asking a random selection of people, what you do is you go to a table tennis tournament and you ask people in the audience what their favourite sport is. You might get huge numbers of people replying that their favourite sport is table tennis. But does that mean that because 90% of your respondents said table tennis, that table tennis really is the nation's favourite sport? Of course not. What you've done there is taken a biased sample. And that is the same thing that Tim is doing. As mentioned earlier, one of the advantages of Tim's method is that it is still quick. It's much quicker than Electra's method, which involves asking the whole population. So here we have 3 different ways of sampling. Electra is just sampling the whole population. In general, this is a bad idea because it's just something that will take too long or be very expensive. Sylvia has a sensible idea. She wants to select a small sample and she wants to select them at random using a random number generator. So this means that it's less likely she will end up with a biased sample. The only problem with hers is that her sample is too small, which means it's generally quite unlikely that she'll get the correct conclusion about what the population's favourite TV show really is. But if she asked something like 20 or 30 or 40 or even 50, then she's much more likely to get the correct conclusion. And that's still a lot quicker than asking all 200 in the population. Finally, to recap, Tim had the sensible thought that 5 students wasn't enough. Unfortunately, his actual suggestion is a bad one. He does have more people in his sample, but his sample is likely to be biased because he's only asking his friends.